Chapter 4, Video 21. We're going to carry on with this validating data example in our date checker program. So we left off with talking about how to do some kind of condition here, and what we're doing here is we're validating our data. And what that means is the user has put in a month and a year, and we've converted that to an integer value. And if they did it wrong, then the try parse or the try catch would catch an error and would kick it out right off the bat, and would drop it down here and say that the data they entered isn't even correct. So if they've typed in, let's say, JAN for January, well, that cannot be parsed into an integer value, so it's going to say that's invalid data, enter in the correct data. And we could probably modify this a little bit further to make it more descriptive. Also, we've spent a little bit of time here cleaning out the two text boxes so that there's an error that's been made, and then setting the focus back to let them fix it up. All right, but the focus on this video is really talking about the conditional input validation. So that's what this is all about right here, is we want to test to make sure that if any of these conditions are met, we want to ask the question right here. And I could probably, again, expand this error message to be a little more descriptive, especially when it comes to explaining what year ranges, because I've got the ranges in here, but I'm not telling the user what those ranges are. I'm assuming they understand, but how can they understand what that is? Now, months they could probably understand, because most people know there's only 12 months. So, but they don't know that I'm looking for the months entered in as a number rather than entered in as JAN, for example. All right, so that's how the testing a bit of the input validation. Now, the second part of this video is looking at what they call it's like a nested condition or a nested decision structure, and we've got 12 of them. So trying to do an if it's a 1, it's January, else if it's a 2, it's February, else if it's a 3, it's March. So that would be a huge block of code. So what we've got is the ability, when we've got a lot of decisions to make, we can use a feature here called the switch. And how it works is the switch will execute a block of statements looking for a particular situation. So here's how it works. If I put in, let's say, a 2 for February, for the month, it would say, let's flip a switch for whatever month you typed in here, if it was a 2. In the case it was a 1, which that's false, we would say it was January. In the case it was a 2, which let's say it was in my case, then it would assign February. That's what we want. So what that does is it outputs a message into the label box that says February, because we know that we just assigned February, space, and we also concatenate it with the year, whichever the year was that they did, and we output that as a string value. And then part of the syntax is to say we have completed our switch, let's break out, and that'll just end that switch. And that's basically how the switch statement works. It's a decision structure. So now we've got a simple if, we've got an if-else, we've got an if-else-if, and now we have a switch. And all 4 of those decision structures sort of apply to different types of conditions. Now up here we have just a standard if. There's a decision structure right there where there's really just checking for validation. So we just use the 1. In this case we've got 12 that we're looking at, potentially 12 different values. So in that case it would be better to use a decision structure like switch, because if we were to use an if statement, we'd have to say if it's 1, do all this. If it's 2, do all this. So we'd have to write 12 of these if blocks, which would be a lot of coding, would be a poor way of doing it. And plus it not only is it redundant, but it's also processor intensive, because all conditions would be checked rather than just checking until the condition was true. All right, so that's a little bit about looking for the conditions using an if statement, and also having a first introduction look at our switch decision structure as well.